What is an easement? A legal right to use another person's land for a specific purpose. What is an encroachment? Unauthorized intrusion of a structure or improvement onto someone else's property. What is the difference between an easement and a license? Easement is a permanent right, license is a temporary permission. What are the two main types of easements? Easement appurtenant and easement in gross. What is an easement appurtenant? An easement that benefits a particular piece of land and passes with the land. What is an easement in gross? An easement benefiting a person or entity, not attached to land ownership. What is a dominant tenement? The property that benefits from an easement. What is a servient tenement? The property burdened by the easement. What does in gross mean in relation to easements? The easement benefits an individual or entity, not a property. What is prescriptive easement? Easement acquired through continuous, open, and hostile use over a statutory period. What is a party wall easement? Easement that allows two adjacent property owners to share a wall. What is an easement by necessity? Easement granted when property is landlocked and needs access. What is an easement by prescription? Easement gained through adverse use for a certain period. What is an express easement? Easement created by written agreement. What is an implied easement? Easement not formally written but inferred by circumstances. What is a dominant estate? The land that benefits from the easement. What is a servient estate? The land subject to the easement. What is gross easement? Another term for easement in gross. What is an easement by grant? Easement created by a deed or written document. What is an easement by reservation? Easement reserved by the seller when transferring property. Creation and termination of easements. How can easements be created? By express grant, reservation, implication, necessity, or prescription. What is easement by estoppel? Easement created when owner allows another to rely on permission. What is release of an easement? Formal giving up of the easement rights by the holder. Can easements be terminated by abandonment? Yes, if the easement holder shows clear intent to abandon. Can easements end by merger? Yes, if the dominant and servient estates become owned by the same person. What is expiration of an easement? When the easement ends according to its terms or a set time. What is necessity termination? Easement by necessity ends if the necessity no longer exists. Can easements be terminated by court order? Yes, often through a quiet title action. What is release deed? Document used to release an easement. What happens if an easement is not used? Non-use alone usually does not terminate an easement, except prescriptive ones. What is implied easement termination? Ends when circumstances that created it change significantly. How is prescriptive easement terminated? By abandonment, merger, or court action. What does quiet title action do? Clears disputes over easements and ownership. Can easements be sold or transferred? Easement appurtenant transfers with property. Easement in gross may be transferable if commercial. What is the scope of an easement? The specific use allowed under the easement. Can an easement be enlarged? Usually not without the servient owner's consent. What is overuse of an easement? Using an easement beyond its intended scope, which can cause termination. What is encroachment in relation to easements? Unauthorized intrusion that may affect easements or property lines. What is presumption regarding easements? Courts may presume an easement exists under certain continuous uses. What is relocation of an easement? Moving an easement's path, usually requiring servient owner consent. Encroachments, 41 to 60. What is an encroachment? When a structure or improvement extends onto another person's land. How can encroachments be discovered? Through surveys or inspections. What is the legal remedy for encroachments? removal, damages, or obtaining a prescriptive easement. What is a survey? Measurement of property boundaries to detect encroachments. What is adverse possession related to encroachments? Claiming ownership if encroachment is open and continuous for statutory period. What is trespass? Unauthorized physical intrusion on another's property. Can encroachments be legalized? Yes, via an easement agreement or boundary line agreement. What is setback encroachment? Encroachment into required setback zones from property lines. How are encroachments handled in closing? They must be disclosed and often resolved before transfer. What is prescriptive easement from encroachment? Easement gained if encroachment is tolerated over time. What is surveyor's certificate? Document verifying property boundaries and encroachments. What is adverse possession claim? Legal claim to ownership based on continuous encroachment. What is boundary line agreement? Agreement to fix boundary lines and resolve encroachments. What is encroachment insurance? Title insurance coverage for encroachments. What is injunction? Court order requiring removal of an encroachment. How long does an encroachment have to be continuous to claim easement? Varies by state, often 5 to 20 years. What is laches? Legal defense claiming rights are lost due to unreasonable delay in enforcement. What is permissive use? Use allowed by owner's permission, which does not create easement. Can neighbors agree to encroachments? Yes, through written easements or agreements. What happens if an encroachment damages property value? Owner may seek damages or removal. Easement rights and responsibilities. What rights does an easement holder have? Reasonable use of the servient estate as agreed. What duties does the servient owner have? Cannot interfere with the easement holder's use. Can servient owner use property? Yes, as long as it does not interfere with the easement. Who maintains an easement? Usually the easement holder, unless otherwise agreed. What is dominant estate maintenance? Duty of dominant owner to upkeep easement. Can an easement holder build structures? Only if allowed by the easement terms. What is easement by prescription proof? Continuous, open, hostile use for statutory period. Can easements be exclusive? Yes, sometimes easements grant exclusive rights. What is a utility easement? Easement allowing utility companies access to install and maintain lines. What is a right-of-way? Type of easement allowing passage over property. What is a conservation easement? Restricts land use to protect natural resources. What happens if an easement obstructs property use? Disputes can be settled in court. Can easements be exclusive to one party? Yes, depending on the agreement. Easement rights and responsibilities. Can easements be transferred separately from the land? Easement appurtenant transfers with the land. Easement in gross may be transferable depending on type. What is a commercial easement in gross? Easement granted to a business entity, transferable and often used by utilities. What is a personal easement in gross? Easement granted to an individual that is not transferable. What is a listing agreement? What happens if an easement interferes with servient owner's property use? The servient owner may seek legal remedies for interference. What is a negative easement? Easement preventing the servient owner from doing something on their land. What is a support easement? Easement to prevent interference with land or structure support. What is an easement appurtenant transfer rule? It automatically transfers with the dominant estate unless expressly excluded. Can easements be modified? Yes, if both parties agree or court orders modification. What is easement by implication? Easement created by actions or circumstances, not formal writing. How can an easement holder enforce rights? Through legal action or injunction. Legal and practical issues, 91 to 100. What role does a survey play in easements and encroachments? Identifies easement locations and detects encroachments. How do title companies handle easements? They disclose existing easements during title searches. What is a title exception related to easements? Easements recorded that affect the title and property rights. How are encroachments disclosed in real estate transactions? Through seller disclosures and survey reports. What is the impact of an encroachment on property value? It can reduce value or complicate transfer. Can an encroachment create a prescriptive easement? Yes, if continuous and meets legal requirements. What is adverse possession? Legal method to gain title through open, hostile, continuous possession over time. What remedies are available for encroachment disputes? Removal, compensation, easement creation, or litigation. What is a boundary dispute? Conflict over property line locations, often involving encroachments. How is an easement by necessity proven? By showing landlocked property needs access. What is the statute of limitations for prescriptive easements? Time period varies by state, typically 5 to 20 years. Can an easement be enforced against third parties? Yes, easements run with the land and bind successors. What is a license in real estate? Permission to use property that is revocable and not an easement. What is laches in easement law? Loss of rights due to unreasonable delay in enforcing easement rights. Can easements affect financing? Yes, lenders review easements for title and use restrictions. Why is it important to review easements before purchasing property? To understand property rights, restrictions, and possible liabilities.